Start recording. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from. My name is Etimof Young. Well, I do wear a couple of hats, but I think for this particular meeting, I'm wearing the hat of co-founder of African Space Leadership Institute. So the institute was actually born following a process that the African Union initiated a few years ago. The African Union wanted to start up a continental space program, and some people were selected to develop a policy, strategy, and some other documents that were going to be used to formalize the program. And some of the participants here were in that group. Of course, Dr. Abiodun was part of that group. And the guest speaker, Dr. Peter Martinez, was also involved in that group, apart from many other things which he's been doing for the continent. And then after that, some of us also came together because we saw a need for continuous, guiding the countries and the continent for informed decision-making when it comes to space. So we formed a think tank, which is focused on space. That's not been anything like that before then. In 2022, to fill the gaps and support policy and decision-making in Africa. Specifically, there are just three major objectives. One is to develop Africa's capacity and capabilities in space policy, strategy, law, governance, and leadership. And then secondly, to support strong positioning of African space activities so that Africa can obtain optimum benefits from space science, technology, applications, and of course, space exploration. And then finally, to strengthen Africa's contribution when it comes to global space discourses and Africa's participation in international forums. But one of the things we did from the onset was, rather than just focusing on what think tanks do, we introduced an educational component into the activities or the program. So we run courses, short courses that are focused on space, like global space policy, African space policy and strategy. Right now, as I speak with you, right now as this event is going on, there's actually a class going on international space law and governance, and that's in collaboration with McGill University in Canada. There are other courses like effective governance of space institutions and many others. So many of this information is on the website. So it's been an interesting journey so far. It's been 2 years, so it's relatively a new organization, but we look forward to working with other organizations, both in the government, in the academia, in the industry, to ensure that the best when it comes to space comes to Africa. So that's a brief introduction, if I may put it that way. But I now will call on Dr. Abiodun's I'm trying to remember how he calls her. When we have Mrs. Judith Abiodun to give a formal welcome.
Thank you so much, Etin.
Yes.
So I extend greetings to everyone. And on behalf of the African Space Leadership Institute, the sponsor of this public lecture series, and also on behalf of the honoree, Dr. Adigun Ade Abiodun, who was the former UN expert on space applications and the former chair of the UN Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. I thank you all for joining via social media and Zoom to this second in the series of public lectures honoring Adigun Ade Abiodun. And I extend a special welcome to our distinguished guest, Dr. Peter Martinez, Executive Director of Secure World Foundation's Colorado, USA. Today's topic is highly interesting and futuristic, and I trust that we will all be enlightened by what Dr. Martinez has to share with us from his own wealth of experience. The evolution of the global space arena and humanity's future in space. Again, welcome to everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Abiodun. Before because Dr. Martinez is really ready to start his lecture, but just for some opening remarks by Professor Faborode. For those who are from Nigeria, Professor Faborode may well, not just Nigeria, across Africa too, may be a known face. He was former Vice Chancellor of Obafemi Awolowo University, where Dr. Abiodun started his career. And then he was also the Secretary General of the Committee of Vice Chancellors, apart from many other things which he's currently involved in. So Professor Pablo, you're welcome to give some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Etin, first for bringing this event to my knowledge and for asking me to make these few remarks. There's no way I can turn it down because of Dr. Abiodun's special impact on my life in the formative years. I came to Ife in 1973 as a young village boy who didn't know anything about engineering or so then. And Dr. Abiodun normally brought it home to us because he took us at least 2 courses. One of them is engineering drawing, and that's our first introduction. Even though in my secondary school I had some hints of technical drawing, but Dr. Abiodun will always say, you guys are technically bankrupt because you don't know anything about technology and so on. But that was very motivating, and I remain very grateful to him now and his other colleagues who give us the good foundation that gave us the sort of life that we have today. For me to have then risen to become the Vice Chancellor of the same university where I came in as a little novice, something that I continue to cherish. And when he came for the launch of his book in 2017 or so, I was then at the Committee of Vice Chancellors, and I was able to work with them at the Nigerian Space Agency to launch the book. Even though there were several tendencies there, but I'm happy the book was launched, and I think it's been a major contribution to the development of space science in Nigeria. And so when I learned of this second edition of the lecture series, I was very pleased that the Space Leadership Agency have taken over this challenge. And as Judith said just a short while ago, and I think no better person could have given this sort of lecture than the chosen distinguished speaker, Peter Martinez from Colorado State in the US. So I think we are in for a major impactful delivery this afternoon, and this afternoon here in Nigeria, maybe this morning in the US and elsewhere in the world. I can see a number of seasoned ambassadors in the audience, and I think it's going to be a tribute to what Dr. Abiodun has contributed to space science. From our teacher that I've just narrated to become the giant in space arena is something that is very inspiring. And I want to welcome you all to the lecture. And we're very pleased in Ife to still be closely associated with Dr. Abiodun today. Thank you very much. Please enjoy the lecture. So it's over to Peter to entertain us. Thank you very much.
So before Peter comes up, because I need to do an introduction, so I'll introduce Peter shortly, but also since Dr. Abiodun, let me also introduce Dr. Abiodun by reading his citation. Earlier on, we had shared his, something like a documentary on him, because we wanted to save time. We didn't want that to take much of our time. So you may have seen that documentary. You're welcome to watch it. But if not, I'll still put the link in the chat box. But I'll just give a brief on Dr. Abiodun. Let me just, and maybe also use some pictures to also support that. Let's see if I can share my screen. Let's see. Okay, let me just use this. I know it may not be, it's not in the format I want, but I have to, instead of trying to go through other. Okay, so Adigun Ade Abiodun was born in Araromi Abiodun in Ogun State in the southwest region of Nigeria. He obtained his undergraduate, master's, and PhD in civil engineering from the University of Washington, Seattle. That's in Washington, USA. Thereafter, he returned to Nigeria and joined the Faculty of Technology of the University of Ife, that's in Ile-Ife, Nigeria. That university is now called the Obafemi Awolowo University, OAU. Although he was appointed as a lecturer in civil engineering, he soon found out that on his arrival that he will be placed in the Department of Agricultural Engineering. Later on, he and two other academic colleagues, Professor Gedembe and Professor Afonja, facilitated the establishment of the Department of Civil Engineering and its hydraulics laboratory. The picture you see there is Dr. Abiodun showing the facility to the then head of state, General Rakubu Gowon. Dr. Abiodun's interest in space was sparked when the incumbent vice chancellor then, Professor Ezekiah Oluwasomi, invited him and 8 other members of staff to contribute to a proposal that Nigeria will later submit to the US National Aeronautics and Space Administration for Landsat 2 data. Shortly after that, in early 1973, he applied and was accepted to participate in the first United Nations Summer School on Remote Sensing training course, which was held in Tarbes, France. That was from August 2021 to September 21 in 1973. In his quest for more knowledge, he applied for and was awarded a National Research Council of Canada Postdoctoral Research Fellowship, which was tenable at Canada Center for Remote Sensing in Ottawa, Canada. That was from December 1974 to February 1976. As soon as he's finished his fellowship, just before the end of his program, he personally delivered a copy of a document which he had prepared titled Remote Sensing Technology in the Development of Nigeria, that was submitted to the Nigerian High Commission at that time in Ottawa. From his academic post at OAU, he was seconded in 1977 by the Nigerian government to the United Nations Outer Space Affairs Division, OSAD. And that office is now called UNOSA, United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. And within 4 years, by 1981, he was appointed as the UN expert on space applications. And he served in this organization in that capacity until his retirement in 1999. There were several initiatives which he brought up while in that position. One of his major initiatives was the establishment of regional centers for space science and technology education in developing countries. So these centers, we have them in India for that region. We have 2 in Africa, one in OAU campus for the English-speaking African region countries, one in Morocco for the French-speaking African countries, one in Brazil, Mexico, with a campus in Mexico. But after his retirement, an additional center was established in China. Another major initiative was a satellite-based cooperative information network called COPIN. While this initiative received strong support from the European Space Agency and 6 West African countries, there was not much counterpart support from the African beneficiaries, and definitely we know what happened to the initiative. However, Professor Gabriel Ajayi at that time, who was in the Department of Electrical Engineering in OAU, tried to sustain this initiative. And right now, the COPINE has been absorbed by the Nigeria's National Space Research and Development Agency, NASDA, as one of its activity centers. So while in office, he organized several courses. One of the major ones was the one supported by Sweden and hosted by Stockholm University that ran from 1990 to 1998. Each course lasted for about 6 weeks and focused on remote sensing education for university educators. Initially, the course was targeted at African educators, but later on, there were participants from Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. Dr. Abiodun has contributed to the establishment and the activities of several space-related organizations, such as the Regional Center for Services in Surveying, Mapping, and Remote Sensing. That's in Nairobi, Kenya. That center is now called the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development, RCMRD. It did something similar for the counterpart in Ife, that's called RECTAS, which the Regional Center for Training in Aerospace Surveys. That center also, the name has been changed to AFRIGIS, African Regional Institute for Geoinformation Science and Technology. He also contributed to the preparatory work that led to the establishment of the Asia-Pacific Satellite Communications Council. After his retirement from the UN, earlier I said he retired in 1999, he was appointed by the then Secretary General of UN, Kofi Annan, as a member of the College of Commissioners of the United Nations Monitoring, Verification, and Inspection Commission on Iraq, UNMOVIC. And I believe many of us know about that body and the activities of that body before it was disbanded. And then he was appointed by the then President Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria as the Senior Special Assistant on Space Science and Technology. While in this office, he led a team of 24 other Nigerian experts to develop a green paper titled Nigerian Space Program, a Blueprint for Scientific and Technological Development. This document was submitted to the President in 2000. And then with the endorsement of the African Union, he was elected and he served as the chair of the United Nations Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space, COPUOS, from June 2004 to June 2006. He served as a member of the Association of Space Explorers panel on the mitigation of asteroids impact. That panel concluded its work with a published report titled Asteroid Threats, a Call for Global Response. In addition to that, he was a contributor to the first Asteroid Day event in June 2015, with the signing of the Asteroid Day 100X Declaration. Dr. Abiodun initiated and co-founded several organizations, including the African Association of Remote Sensing of the Environment, AARSE, the African Leadership Conference on Space Science and Technology, ALC. He was a board member of the Space Radiation Advisory Council. Actually, he was one of those that initiated the establishment of that body after the Unispace conference. He was a trustee of the International Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing. He also served as a board member and later chair of the Space Week International Association, which has also been renamed the World Space Week Association. And very recently, he served as a member of the African Union Space Working Group that developed the African Space Policy and Strategy. These are just a few of the things which he's done. I mean, there are several others. So I really encourage you to watch the full documentary. Throughout his career and immediately after, Dr. Abiodun continued to do research, to continue to lecture and to publish in his field of interest. And as Professor Fabrode mentioned, in 2017, he published a book titled Nigeria's Space Journey, Understanding Its Past and Reshaping His Future. There are still copies of that book for those who are interested at least I'm aware that there are copies in Abuja. For those who are interested, if you can maybe reach out and I can direct you to how you can get it. So we thank Dr. Abiodun for his service to his motherland, Nigeria, to his fatherland, Africa, as well as to the global community. That's the person we are here to honor today. Thank you for listening to that short citation. And just before I bring Dr. Martinez, I also need to say a bit about Dr. Martinez, whom I've also had opportunity to interact with or encounter. And I think the one that comes to mind readily was in 2011, if I remember correctly, when we had the very first ISC in Cape Town, South Africa. And I think somewhere along the line, we had this masterclass. No, it was a session with the masters, so to say. And the two masters in that session were Dr. Abiodun and Dr. Martinez. I don't know whether you remember that event that we had there. So Dr. Peter Martinez is the Executive Director of the Secure World Foundation. He has extensive experience in multilateral space diplomacy, space policy formulation, and space regulation. He also has extensive experience in capacity building, in space science and technology, and in workforce development. Prior to joining the Secure World Foundation, he chaired the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space, the working group on long-term sustainability of outer space activities, which we popularly call the LTS. That committee negotiated a set of international consensus guidelines to promote the safety and sustainability of space operations. And for those who are in this space arena, you know, one of the concerns, it's about space safety, space security, space sustainability. In 2012 and in 2013, he was South Africa's representative at the UN group of government experts on transparency and confidence building measures for space activities. And I've actually read some of his papers, which he has written regarding that also. From 2010 to 2015, he was chair of the South African Council for Space Affairs. That's the National Regulatory Authority for Space Activities in South Africa. From 2014 to 2018, he was Professor of Space Studies at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. But before this, he had acquired almost 2 decades of executive management experience and associated general management skills at the South African Astronomical Observatory, SAAO. He's a member of several bodies, including the International Academy of Astronautics, the International Institute of Space Law. He's a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and an honorary professor of the University of Cape Town. He has authored and co-authored over 200 publications on topics in space policy, space sustainability, astronomy, space research, space law, and space governance. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, team, for the kind introduction. And let me just begin by saying that what a pleasure it is to be among fellow Africans. Good morning, good evening to you, wherever you may be. Good day. And thank you for the great honor to present this lecture in honor of my esteemed friend and colleague, Ade Abiodun, whom I've had the pleasure of working with in several of the capacities that you mentioned in your introduction. I first met Ade towards the end of his tenure at UNMOVIC. Ade, you probably don't remember me. I was a very young person on one of the delegations. I think you had been working in the years leading up to the Unispace 3 conference that took place in 1999. I'm sure you were heavily involved in the office's preparations for that. But I subsequently encountered Dr. Abiodun in several other capacities over the years, and particularly during his service on the Nigerian delegation to UN COPUOS, and then, of course, under his chairmanship of COPUOS, from 2004 to 2006. But some of my fondest memories of working with Ade was when we worked with him under his leadership to start the series of conferences known as the African Space Leadership Conference, or ALCs, which took place from 2005 in Abuja. The second was 2007 in South Africa. The third was 2009 in Algeria. And then it was firmly established and took place every 2 years. And I still think that there is a place for an event like the ALC. And perhaps during the discussion afterwards, we can talk about the role of ASLI in reviving what I thought was a fantastic conference for the African continent that brought everybody together under one tent, regardless of whether it was government or industry or academia. So perhaps I can start, I will try and share my screen at this point. Please let me know if you are seeing it. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. The slides? Okay. So when a team asked me to present this lecture in honor of Dr. Abiodun, I thought, now, what would be a topic fitting of Dr. Abiodun's immense stature in the African space arena? And I didn't want to just give a kind of an overview of where things stand in Africa. I wanted a topic that would reflect his visionary and forward thinking. And so this is what I came up with, is looking at the evolution of the global space arena and some possible scenarios for humanity's future in space. And as I give my presentation today, you may wonder, where is Africa in all this? Why am I not talking about Africa? Why am I talking about these global trends? And that is my question to you, is where is Africa in this? Where do we want Africa to be? What is our vision for Africa as humanity becomes a multi-planetary species? And so I want to start with this cover slide, which has this, what is the most iconic image of the space age. This image was taken by one of the Apollo astronauts on the way to the moon in 1972. And they looked back at the Earth and they saw this beautiful view of planet Earth and the African continent. And to me, it's ironic that this most iconic image of the space age also displays the continent that for many years has been the least developed in the space arena. It's also my favorite image of the space age because I am down there in that image towards the southern end of the continent. And Ade, I think you are in that image as well, right? You were in Africa in 1972?
In 72, yes, I was at Ife. That's
right. So you are in that image as well. And so I thought this would be an interesting image to start our presentation today. So looking at maps and representations of our understanding of the world, this is a map called the Mappa Mundi. It's a medieval map that is in Hereford Cathedral in the United Kingdom, and it shows the world as it was understood by the medieval map makers of the time. Now, when you look at this map, you may not recognize much, and that's because it shows the world in the way that it was understood or perceived by the map makers of the time. And in their world, the center of the world was Jerusalem and the Holy Land, and everything else revolved around that. And so this map, let me give you a little bit of help there. This is what is shown on the map, and you can see that Egypt and the Maghreb countries feature very strongly in this. Very little else was known about the African continent, and so you see how their understanding of the world was very much shaped by what they had been exposed to, and in a sense limited, and they could not imagine the vastness of the rest of the world that was out there waiting to be discovered. For example, you don't see the whole of the Africa, below the northernmost countries. You don't see any of the Americas. You don't see Antarctica and so on. So just to show that when we think of, when we envision things, we are very often limited in our capacity to envision things by what we know. And so there's a challenge to really try and apply our imaginations to these things, especially when it comes to the topic of foresight and thinking ahead to what the future may hold for all of us. So perhaps just to set the scene before we look to the future, let's perhaps begin by looking to the past to see where we have come from in the space arena. So on this one slide, I have attempted to summarize all of the main issues in the space arena from the early days of the space age to today, and also encapsulating the main challenges that we are facing. And if we start with the top left, you see there in 1966, you see the close to the start of the space age, you see that the main spacefaring countries were the United States and the Soviet Union and a few of their close allies. And there were very few satellites in space. And the two Cold War superpowers were more or less on parity with each other. Fast forward to 2016, 50 years later, you see that the world has really changed. There are many, many more spacefaring nations, which are shown in yellow on this map. And in fact, if this map were depicting today, you would see even many more African countries indicated on there, but that chart was drawn in 2016. You also see that the space environment has gone from being a pristine orbital environment shown in the top left to a increasingly congested orbital environment that is congested with active satellites, contaminated with space debris, and increasingly also congested by both state and non-state actors alike. The chart in the bottom left shows the evolution of the actors in the space arena, starting in the very, very early days with the United States and the Soviet Union. So the US being shown in the light blue and dark blue shades, the Soviet Union in the orange and red shades. And you can see there that the orange is the Russian civilian, red Russian military, dark blue US military, and light blue US civilian. So you can see that in the early days of the space age, military space activities by the two superpowers dominated the activities in space. And then gradually throughout the 70s, we started to see the emergence of other nations as spacefaring, and that's shown by the yellow band on this chart that you can see grows steadily over time through right up through the mid 2010s. Then what is most interesting on that chart is the green band, which was pretty negligible until the late 1990s, early 2000s. And this is the emergence of the commercial space sector, which today completely dominates the space arena. And if this chart were to be continued to present day, I will, in a short while, I will show you a figure of where we are in terms of active satellites today. But the commercial sector has taken off exponentially and is now the dominant actor in space. And this raises lots of questions that I hope we can talk about during my presentation and in the discussion to follow. So also what has changed is the character and the types of space activities that we are now seeing space activities that were only dimly imagined in the early days of the space age, or perhaps not even imagined at all in the late 1960s when the Outer Space Treaty was negotiated. We are seeing, for example, things like the ability to service satellites in space and to refuel them, to repair and refuel satellites in space, which can greatly extend their lifespan and thereby help to mitigate the proliferation of space debris. This, however, also raises concerns that if you can approach a satellite and attach to it and do things to that satellite to repair it, you could also potentially use those capabilities to attack a satellite and to disable it. So we're also seeing the proliferation of a growing number of counter-space capabilities, which are depicted in the top right quadrant of those four figures on the bottom right-hand side of the chart. We are starting to see the development and testing of counter-space capabilities that are designed to disable or deny an adversary of their space capabilities in times of military conflict. Some of these technologies, when they are tested, produce enormous amounts of debris, which are very hazardous to all space operators. And this is something that the United Nations has tackled through a General Assembly resolution. And I want to come back to this point later in my talk, when we talk about the engagement of Africa in the shaping of the governance of the global space arena, because the underlying international regulatory framework under which we all operate nowadays was developed largely in the late 1960s and early 1970s and was shaped by a few space actors. Today, the situation is very different. We are going through another phase of rulemaking, and I believe that Africa should be much more engaged than it is in the second phase of rulemaking for space activities. Also, another activity or new kind of activity that has emerged is the advent of extremely large constellations of satellites. I'm talking about space systems that comprise not dozens, but thousands and even tens of thousands of satellites as one single system. And this, incidentally, this is not a new idea. If you go back to the early days of the space age, before we had rockets capable of reaching geostationary orbit, there were actually suggestions to have large constellations of low Earth orbiting satellites. And of course, that was superseded by the advent of launch vehicles capable of deploying satellites to geostationary orbit. But it's interesting to see that 60 years later, we've come back full circle, and we are now deploying very large constellations of satellites in low Earth orbit. And then finally, in the bottom right-hand quadrant, you see another new kind of space activities that were only dimly imagined in the early days of the space age, but now is almost a reality, or will soon be a reality. And that is our ability to harness the natural resources on other celestial bodies. And this will be absolutely necessary if humanity is to have a sustained presence on the moon or any other celestial bodies. We cannot take all of the resources from planet Earth that we need to sustain a human presence in space or other celestial bodies. We will need to live off the land, so to speak. And there are now a lot of groups working on developing the methods to extract natural resources from these other celestial bodies. And that raises questions about the rational and equitable use of these space resources. So that just kind of paints a picture of where we are today and the kinds of governance questions that are being raised. Now, let's start looking to the future. And but before we do that, let me just quickly review where we are with the number of active satellites. So, sorry, if this chart shows the evolution in the number of active satellites in space. So this is not showing space debris. This is only active operational satellites as a function of time, beginning in 1957 with the launch of Sputnik up through today. And of course, unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to update the graph, but I did update the number for you. You can see that the number of satellites is increasing exponentially, and that as of today, as of yesterday, the number of active satellites in orbit was more than 10,500. There is, of course, a much larger number of debris objects that number in the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands or even millions, depending on what size of fragment you're looking at. And basically, the debris distribution in space, which is not shown on the slide, this is only active satellites. The debris situation in space is basically like the distribution of material on a beach, where you have a few large boulders, many stones and rocks, and millions of sand grains. And it's the same sort of distribution of material. And that debris up there poses a collision hazard to active satellites and crewed spacecraft. And so it's something that we will have to deal with, because the situation in certain orbits is such that even if we were to stop launching new satellites into space, we will still see a growth in the debris population from fragmentations, breakups, and so on. And every time there's a collision, it produces more debris, and you can have the potential for a runaway cascade that we all want to avoid, because that would render certain orbits unusable. So with these facts in mind, let us now look at how we might approach thinking about the future of the space arena. And I want to begin with this schematic diagram of what is known as a futures cone. Those of you who have done futures studies or have been involved in futures exercises will no doubt be familiar with this. But for those of you who aren't, what this depicts is our ability to imagine potential future scenarios. And this is shown by the cone, where the time axis runs from left to right, and the scenarios or the order that you experience in the world is depicted on the vertical axis. And so you see that as you project further and further into the future, it becomes harder to imagine what it looks like. The scenarios become more speculative, and therefore are more prone to errors. But nevertheless, you can imagine that in the center of the cone, there are a series of what you could consider quite probable futures. And that's shown in the sort of the dark blue circle in the center of the cone. Then if you expand a bit beyond that, you have futures that you consider plausible, maybe not very probable, but they could potentially happen. And then, of course, the outer parts of the cone, those are the possible futures that cannot be excluded because they're not physically impossible. They could possibly happen, but they're not probable to happen. And so those are the kinds of the distributions of different futures. And then you can look at what kinds of futures might be preferable, because some futures will definitely be more preferable than others. And those futures we can refer to as the high road futures, which are shown in the upper part of this cone. Those are the preferable futures, and each of those will have scenarios attached to them. Then you can also have a series of less preferable futures that we want to avoid, and those are called the low road futures, and depicted in the bottom half of the cone. Also, you see some red lines there. Those are what we call wildcard events, where you may be moving along a trajectory to some probable future, and then there is a totally unanticipated black swan event that puts you on a different trajectory completely. So, for example, a few years ago, we experienced the COVID pandemic that had been predicted by scientists, but I mean, the world in general was not ready for it, and it completely changed the future path of many individuals, organizations, and one could say even countries. And so one can imagine things like that as well happening for the space arena. So I just want you to keep this kind of futures cone model in mind as we talk about some possible futures. And so I now want to talk about what could be some of the axes of uncertainty that we could have as we imagine potential futures? I mentioned the growing importance of the commercial sector. I mentioned governance, that the emergence of new space activities, new actors, raises governance challenges. There are also, and there will always be, the political and military dimension of space activities. And another dimension that we can consider is humans in space as well. And you can pick any number of dimensions that you want to consider, but for the purposes of this discussion today, I have picked these four. And so in each of these dimensions or axes, you can imagine a range of possibilities. So let's start with a commercial one. Beginning with commercial space, on the left-hand side, you could imagine a set of futures in which commercial space is very limited. There's a lot of hype around commercial space now, but there could be futures in which this hype is debunked, that commercial space doesn't work for any possible number of reasons. I mean, one possible reason is that we have a runaway Kessler syndrome in orbit, and it becomes completely unprofitable to carry out commercial space activities. I have a colleague who says that within a few years, low Earth orbit could become uninsurable. So we could have a range of futures where commercial space activities are very limited, and they are limited mostly to satellite communications, and the value of commercial space is created on the ground, which is pretty much the case as it is today. I mean, commercial space activities are really providing benefits and services to customers on the ground. And we're having services delivered through space, but the value creation and the customers are all on the ground. Let's move over to the opposite end of the commercial axis of space. And in that scenario, you could have a very well-developed commercial sector that is producing and selling a wide range of goods and services in space, where value is created in space and there are customers that are buying those goods and services in space, not only on Earth. So a very wide range of possibilities there. Let's now look at the governance axis. On the one extreme, looking at the left, we could have a very fragmented governance of space activities where there is a lack of rules and norms, and space becomes a kind of a lawless Wild West where perhaps commercial actors do whatever they like. You may think that this is an impossible scenario for space, and I hope that we may have time in the Q&A. I will give you an example of where this has happened on Earth historically. So it isn't so implausible that it could happen in space. And by the way, this example affected the African continent greatly. On the right-hand side of the governance scale, we have states have managed to address the governance issues, to have a coherent cooperative governance framework in space with clear rules and norms of behavior, and law and order prevails in outer space. Let's look at the political and military dimensions. You could have a set of scenarios where nationalism prevails. As we all see from the news, the world is once again becoming more multipolar than it was, people would have imagined even 10 years ago. And so we could imagine a set of futures where nationalism prevails and countries engage in unilateral actions in space and militarize space to achieve their political purposes, and perhaps we even see conflict in space. On the other end of the political military axis, we could imagine a set of futures where multilateralism is respected and the principles of the Outer Space Treaty are clarified and applied in new situations and contexts that were not imagined by the drafters of the treaty, but that collectively we find interpretations of those principles and embody them in norms, rules, practices, national legislation, etc. And space is regarded as a commons, where we don't have military conflicts in space producing lots of debris, and there are agreed norms of behavior for all space actors. Let's finally look at the access of humans in space. On the one extreme, we could have a scenario that basically looks like today, where only a tiny portion of humanity ever experiences outer space for themselves. And this continues to be limited to a handful of national astronauts and perhaps a very small number of extremely wealthy space tourists. On the other hand, we could have humanity that becomes truly a spacefaring civilization, where very many thousands of humans experience outer space themselves. You find humans all over low Earth orbit and cislunar space, and even humans setting foot on the surface of Mars. And so you can see there's a very wide range of possible scenarios looking just at these four axes. So to bring some order to this, what I have done is to pick four possible scenarios that you can think of as occupying the different quadrants of the futures cone that I mentioned in my previous slide. And I'll take you through some of those. And you may be wondering, where is Africa in all this? Why am I not talking about Africa? And that is the question that I want to pose to you, and the conversation that I hope we can have at the end of this presentation. So there are a number of boundary conditions. Let's look at the astronauts for R&D, some private tourism, but mostly it's robotics with very few humans involved in exploration. And perhaps there may even be visits to Mars, but it's just visits and not a sustained human presence on another world. In the high road scenario, we have thousands of people that are living and working in space. This increased human presence drives commercial, civil, and military developments in space, where there is a human and AI robotic partnership in space activities, and a sustained the tourism industry, or the human spaceflight industry, is a contributor to the development of new technologies and capabilities that extend humanity's reach into space. If we look at the boundary conditions for commercial scenarios, the low road scenarios have commercial space basically being the same as it is today, low Earth orbit for imaging applications, say, the position, navigation, and timing, the communications activities, and really not much of a change. Commercial space transportation in these scenarios remains very, very risky. We continue to rely on largely expendable vehicles, although I must say that I think that the era of expendable launch vehicles probably will be coming to an end. We're seeing more and more commercial actors focusing on the development of reusable vehicles. So I think this is definitely one set of pathways that we are probably firmly on for access to orbit. And in these low road scenarios, the space economy maybe reaches 0.5% or 1% of the global economy. In the high road scenarios, commercial space has expanded to many new kinds of activities and services that are not even imaginable today, that space becomes part of the mainstream global economy, where companies that we don't normally associate with space are now engaged in space activities. And I saw a lovely example of this 2 weeks ago at the International Astronautical Congress in Milan. You have a company like Prada that is now involved in the development of the moon suit for the future lunar landings. It's who would have connected a company like Prada with the development of wear for astronauts walking on the moon in future. We also see companies like Toyota developing concepts for lunar vehicles, etc. So I can see in these positive futures where the commercial companies that you don't normally associate with space become significant players in the space domain. And it really expands very, very considerably the commercial opportunities for space. In these futures, we have routine commercial on-orbit servicing, refueling, debris removal. We have in-space manufacturing, beneficiation of resources, etc. Commercial transportation becomes highly reliable, and we are looking at a space economy in the range of trillions, which reaches several percent of the terrestrial global economy. Looking at the governance scenarios, the low-road scenarios are somewhat distressing, because in those you have multilateral fora, the existing multilateral fora like the UN becoming weak and ineffective. There are already many people who say that the Outer Space Treaty is obsolete and that fora like COPUOS move too slowly. I personally think this is a very dangerous thing to do, because nowadays we would never negotiate the principles that are enshrined in the Outer Space Treaty, and many of the challenges we face are global. So if we didn't have a body like the UN to deal with these issues, we would have to create one just to deal with the types of issues that we're dealing with in space today, because no country or commercial actor, no matter how powerful they are or how large they are, can ensure the safety of their space operations and through their means alone. It really does need collective efforts. In these low-road scenarios, there are many more countries in space, but no collective vision about our future in space. So lots of potential for mistrust, conflict, etc. Nationalism dominates in these scenarios with unilateral interpretations of the existing treaties and unilateral actions. And we risk having debris making certain orbits unusable, and unscrupulous commercial actors that exploit regulatory lacunae for their commercial advantage, and space becomes a kind of a Wild West. In the high road scenarios, governments can agree on cooperative governance solutions, states strive for common understandings of regulatory questions. We get a handle on the space debris problem, and space is a rules-based domain where states all behave responsibly. So there are four possible scenarios that emerge in this kind of context, and of course these are all hypothetical, but I think they allow us to probe the possible futures. So the first scenario, shown in the top right quadrant, is what I call 2001, and it's inspired by the movie 2001, the Stanley Kubrick movie, which I'm sure is familiar to many of you. If you have not seen it, please do yourself a favor and watch that movie. It is probably, well, in my opinion, one of the best science fiction movies on space ever made. It was made before the moon landing of 1969. It is scientifically incredibly accurate, incredibly visionary, and it depicts a very exciting future for humanity in space, in which the commercial sector plays a key role in allowing humanity to become a multi-world civilization. And so this is kind of the set of most positive futures in space, where humanity really has a destiny in space. So I call that 2001. The second set of futures I call Avalon, and that is where humanity sees its destiny tied to Earth. Now, this may sound counterintuitive to an audience of space buffs such as yourselves, but really, we space people are actually in the minority in the world. Most people in the world don't really care about outer space, and I kind of understand why they don't, because the planet that matters the most to us is the one that we actually live on, and we need to take care of it. We haven't been doing a very good job of that. Not only have we been messing up the Earth, but we're starting to mess up outer space as well. And one can imagine a set of futures where the global population, as I'm sure you all know, is predicted to peak perhaps somewhere around 2080, but it won't continue rising indefinitely. And we could reach a future where we have a population that is sustainable on our planet, that issues of climate action, global climate change, environmental stewardship, that those really become the dominant themes of civilization, and that we realize that we have one world, that we have to, we all have one common future on the Earth, and the Earth becomes the focus of humanity, and we use space just to support a human presence on our world, and we don't really want to go and explore other alien worlds that are inhospitable to humans, because there is no other place in the universe that we know that can support human life, where you can walk around without a spacesuit and just experience the wonderful world around you. So those are a second set of futures that I call Avalon, where humanity ties its destiny to Earth, and space has a limited contribution, but basically supporting people on the ground. The third set of futures is perhaps the darkest. These are called Tartarus, which comes from the ancient mythology. This was like kind of the underworld of the underworld, if you like, the place you really did not want to land up in. And in these futures, the space becomes a battleground. It becomes a lawless, Wild West kind of situation. And in fact, it might even become unusable, because we could have situations where conflict in space or accidental collisions or space events resulting from irresponsible actions and behaviors could render orbits unusable and basically trap humanity on the Earth. It's kind of strange to think that if we mess things really up, then we could have futures where our descendants don't enjoy the benefits of space that today we take for granted. And that is a very dark set of futures, which I hope we can avoid. The fourth quadrant has a set of futures that I call Elysium, after the Hollywood movie of the same name, which, by the way, featured a South African actor, Charlotte Copley. Again, a nice movie if you enjoy science fiction. But in those scenarios, the commercial sector has advanced tremendously, and it is a dominant actor in the space arena. And it is moved to fill in the gaps in regulation and governance that states are incapable of doing, because remember, this is in terms of the governance axis, this is the poor governance scenario. So the strong commercial scenario is poor governance, and in these scenarios the private sector has stepped in basically to do the kinds of functions that states ought to have done. But what this means is that yes, space is full of opportunities, but only for some who are part of these commercial ventures, and the rest of humanity is not really benefiting from these developments. So those are the four scenarios. And basically this slide essentially shows what I have just described, but just has it in words. I will not dwell on this. So in the first scenario, 2001, we have a cooperative, communal, and expansive use of the space domain. In the second set of scenarios, we have a also cooperative and communal, but grounded set of futures. Then in the third set of futures, space is congested, rivalrous, and possibly we are confined to the surface of the Earth if orbits become too risky to use. And the final set of futures, we have a congested and rivalrous domain, but it's also exclusive in the sense that the benefits of space are limited to a very small number of people on the Earth. And again, this raises questions I posed at the beginning of the talk about, where does Africa fit into all of this? So to to flesh out some of these scenarios, you may wonder how would we know if these various scenarios are manifesting? And there are certain signals that you can watch out for. And by signals, I mean literally like reading the headlines in the newspapers to see which of these scenarios or groups of scenarios seems to be shaping up. And so, for example, in the 2001 scenario, some signals that this scenario may be emerging are that states agree on international norms of behavior. There is a ban on testing anti-satellite weapons in space, and there are rules on equitable space resource utilization. Some kind of space traffic coordination is implemented at the global level, perhaps through a federation of national initiatives. Investment in the commercial space sector continues to rise, and there are more terrestrial companies that extend their business models into and through space. And we see an explosion of successful commercial human spaceflight, kind of analogous to what happened with the explosion in commercial aviation after Lindbergh's flight across the Atlantic. And within a decade, you went from just one person flying across the Atlantic to many thousands, all of that enabled by the commercial sector. Looking then at the next series of scenarios where humanity uses space, but the focus really is on planet Earth, signals that scenario may be emerging or that states agree on international norms of behavior as they did before. We have a space traffic management system in place, but the investment and interest in commercial space dwindles, and governments focuses on the use of space for societal benefit and meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. And commercial human spaceflight remains a risky and expensive activity, and most people don't have ambitions of going into space. The third set of scenarios, the really undesirable one that I mentioned, Tartarus, where space is rivalrous, congested, and we're possibly confined to Earth. In that scenario, signals that we may be heading that way is that states fail to agree on international norms of behavior. They fail to agree on banning the use of weapons in space. That multilateralism, the multilateral fora become weak and ineffective. And so some of you may have heard, for example, that last year, the committee, the legal subcommittee of COPUOS failed to agree on a report. This was unprecedented and very, very concerning for those of us who regard COPUOS as the leading international body for the progressive development and codification of space law. This was very unfortunate, and hope that it was an isolated incident, but it shows the strain under which the current multilateral system finds itself. In these sets of scenarios, other signals are that there's poor adherence to space debris and space sustainability practices. I mean, there are existing guidelines on space debris mitigation, and as was mentioned in the introduction, the UN adopted 21 guidelines for the long-term sustainability of outer space activities. But this relies on states implementing those voluntary guidelines in good faith, and there could be futures where this just doesn't happen. Also, commercial investment declines under such conditions because it becomes too risky for companies to invest in space activities that are not military and address, or address national security needs. And we see a proliferation of counter space capabilities, and commercial human spaceflight under those conditions remains very risky and expensive. And the final scenario, this is the one where the private sector dominates and kind of fills in the governance gaps left by states, but they do so obviously to boost they introduce only as much law and order as is necessary to boost their commercial gain, and not really for the benefit of the world at large. And signals that such a scenario might be emerging, again, is that states fail in their governance mandate, multilateral fora become ineffective, but investment in the commercial sector continues to rise, and companies initiate and fund extremely ambitious space projects that essentially amount to resource grabs of the outer space domain, in a kind of first come, first served sort of scenario. And there's a growing influence of large companies in governmental processes, and perhaps even replacing government in distant off-world destinations like the moon or the asteroid belt or whatever. So those are just some sets of signals that you might see that would indicate which of these scenarios we are headed towards. So what about Africa? And I think that we need to think about, with these kinds of scenarios, where are we headed in the African continent? And I have more slides, but I think in the interest of time, perhaps I should stop here, and maybe we can start a discussion. And because I don't think that the subsequent slides I have are necessarily going to shed much more light. I talk a bit about the African space industry and about other events, but I really would like to have more of a discussion at this point. So maybe what I'm going to do is to stop sharing, and perhaps we can have a bit of a discussion, because I know that we will be running out of time at some point, and I want to leave some time for some conversation. So I'll stop sharing now, and hopefully we can take some questions or have some discussion.
Well, thank you, Dr. Martinez. This has been a very excellent talk or lecture. Actually, when you first proposed that title, the title of the lecture, one of the things I did as a mentee of Dr. Abiodun, I remember that he had written some papers having a similar title. I'm not sure you are aware of that, but I didn't want to inform you, so that I didn't want it to be biased in your talk. So I actually have them here. Maybe I'll share them later. In 2008, he wrote a paper titled "Future Trends in the Global Arena: Challenges and Opportunities for Africa," and that was published in I don't know whether this journal is still working, African Skies Journal, October 2008. Some of the things he mentioned there, just running through it now. Well, maybe I'll just send it later. I think that's just the best thing to do. And then there was another paper which he wrote in, this was 2012, yes. This was in Space Policy Journal, similar title, but this was slightly different: Trends in the Global Space Arena, Impact on Africa and Africa's Response. So it's nice to see the line of thinking, which you have also kind of displayed here shortly. I'm not sure I don't know if you've seen those papers before. And I remember when I was at ISU, one of the things we were taught, they discussed at the International Space University, future studies. So we say we can't predict the future, but we have alternate futures. We have possible futures. So we now determine which particular future we want to create for ourselves. And I think that's the scenario you have painted now. So having this in mind, I open the floor for any questions or any comments or any response to what Dr. Martinez has presented. You only say something, Dr. Martinez? I think I saw you move forward.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for reminding me of those papers. No, I haven't seen those two papers that you mentioned for a very long time. Of course, the African Skies paper I'm very familiar with, because I was the editor of African Skies, and that publication became basically the outlet for papers presented at the ALC conferences. And so the publication has not had an issue for a number of years, but you know, if ever the ALC conferences are reanimated, then I think that I would be very happy to see the proceedings being published in new editions of African Skies, which are archived in the literature and accessible online to anybody who searches for them on the literature servers. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yes, thank you. I think at the beginning you also mentioned that maybe somewhere in our discussions we'll talk about where maybe some of the roles that the ASLI could play, either in reviving the ALC and of course the different initiatives that the ALC has already been doing. But I see Nelly. Don't worry, it can come up. I've seen your hand, Nelly. Sorry. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, please go ahead. You can. Yeah.
Thank you, ATM, and thank you so much, Dr. Martinez, for that presentation. I have a lot of questions, but I'll try to ask just one. And I just want to ask about Africa. This is so interesting, but I just want to know your opinion on Africa's normative influence on space governance without the necessary infrastructure. Okay, because I saw a critic, an academic critic on one of the doctors. I'm sure most of us, we know Dr. Timmy B's work on space governance and how she encourages Africa to be involved. And somebody critiqued that, saying she was promoting a Marxist ideal and, trying to brainwash young Africans to think we should concentrate on space governance when we should concentrate more on technology and getting engineers. And as a PhD student in politics myself, looking at space, I think this is really interesting. If we have people in academia, like we can't even agree on what Africa should be doing. So how can we contribute to space governance if we don't have the necessary infrastructure? What language would we be using? Yeah.
Thank you. That is an excellent question, and I'm going to actually show some of the slides that I had in there because this was one of the topics that I wanted to address. So I don't know if you should be seeing a slide of the UN COPUOS. Is that what's showing to you now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that question. So the thing is, I think it is very, very important for Africa to engage in these governance discussions because, as I mentioned earlier on in my talk, we are now in a second period of space rulemaking where the rules that are going to shape the space arena for the next 50, 100 years are being made right now. And it's yes, we need the technology, but you don't need to have all the technological capabilities to be part of the rulemaking process. In fact, you could argue that if you don't have the technologies, that's a very good reason for you to be part of the rulemaking process, so that the rules don't actually raise barriers for you to become spacefaring and develop space capabilities and have equitable access to space in the future when you may be able to do so, even if you are not able to do so right now. And I want to show on this slide here, you see, this is the meeting room where COPUOS meets. In Vienna, this is the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which currently has 102 member states. On paper, Africa is fairly well represented. The slide shows the membership of UN COPUOS. Africa is fairly well represented on paper. But if you go to the room, and Ade will testify to this, if you attend the meetings in the room, very often the African desks are not occupied. Maybe there'll be somebody from a local mission sitting there in the first day or two of the conference, but subsequently there may not be active engagement in the discussions, and so that means that they're not part of the conversations. Now, there are a number of African countries that are very, very active and play a very constructive role in COPUOS, and this is good. I think that we need to strengthen African participation. We need to improve our coordination. I've always been impressed with the amount of coordination that the Latin American region has when it comes to engaging in these multilateral bodies. And so we could take some lessons from the way that the GRULAC countries coordinate their positions when they come to COPUOS. Africa, there have been attempts at coordination in the past, and those have met with mixed success. Some years it's more than others. It really depends on who are the regional, the chairs of the Africa group in Vienna in any given year. But I think this is one area where we could improve our engagement in COPUOS. Another is for those African countries that are very experienced in COPUOS to perhaps support other delegations that are just emerging to come up to speed with the events in COPUOS. My organization, Secure World, we publish a resource called the COPUOS Briefing Book, which I will show when I stop sharing, and another resource called the Handbook for New Actors in Space. These are things that would support African countries to become more active and informed participants in the space arena. And you mentioned specifically technology. So let me give you one example of where a technology that most African countries do not possess, and I would argue would not want to possess, and has a governance question linked to it. And this is the development of counterspace or destructive anti-satellite technologies. But just before I go to that, you see on this slide, we have 102 member states of COPUOS, a fair number on there. Right now, another African state, Djibouti, is up for candidacy of COPUOS membership. So we may see another African state joining COPUOS in this session of the General Assembly. But to come back to the issue of counterspace, you will recall that in my third scenario, Tartarus, where space becomes unusable because of conflict and poor behavior, this is a real danger. More countries are developing anti-satellite weapons, many of which are kinetic, so there can be a whole range of anti-satellite capabilities, such as cyber-directed energy, etc. And kinetic ones basically are where you destroy another satellite through impact or an explosive or something like that. And the testing of these kinds of weapons produces very large amounts of space debris. And the space debris is indiscriminate. It does not care about who is a friend, an ally, or a foe. It just follows the rules of orbital dynamics and poses a great risk to everybody. So in November of 2022, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 7741, which calls upon countries to commit not to perform these destructive anti-satellite missile tests in space. And 155 countries voted in favor of that resolution, including a significant number of African countries. So in this map, the countries shaded in dark blue are the ones that proposed the resolution. The ones that voted for the resolution are shown in light blue. And you can see that many, many countries in Africa voted in favor of that resolution because they thought that the destruction of satellites in space producing debris would endanger their national space activities. The dark blue countries on the slide are the ones that have actually made the commitment called for in that resolution. In other words, the commitment that they voted for in the UN. So, the resolution called upon countries to make the commitment. The countries shown in dark blue have actually made that political commitment. And what the slide shows is that to date, none of the African countries have made the political commitment that they called for in that resolution. And sometimes the argument that I hear when I ask some of my African colleagues, well, you voted in favor of this, why has your government not yet made this commitment? And the answer that I get is, well, we don't have that technology and we don't think that we would ever have it, so we don't see the point. But this is precisely it. This is how you create an international norm, by more countries supporting certain ways of behaving, that this eventually becomes a practice of states, which is one of the sources of international law. So back to your question, I think it is very, very important for the African countries to participate in these kinds of governance discussions, even if they don't have the kinds of technologies that the other stronger parties do, because as we're making the rules, it's very important to be sitting around the table in this next generation of rulemaking for space activities, to be sure that you will still have the ability to access outer space for your national needs when you finally have the technical means to do so. And I think I'm not sharing the screen anymore. Is that right?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks for your response.
So I just want to show, so this is the resource I spoke about. This is available on our website. It's also available on hard copy, but you can download this for free on our website. It's called the COPUOS Briefing Book. It is available in English, Spanish, and French. Hopefully also for our Portuguese-speaking African colleagues, one day in Portuguese as well. And it describes UN COPUOS and all the processes on the committee. And for those of you who are not familiar, we have our Handbook for New Space Actors, which has just come out in the second edition, that talks about all of the fundamental principles of space law, the basic elements of national space policy, etc. And both of those are available for free on our website. So thank you for indulging me with such a long answer, but I thought the question was really very, very good and pertinent.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and thanks for those materials have been very useful. I'm also aware that you revised them, I think, this year, so you've included a lot more useful information there. I saw a hands up. I think that's Justin. I saw your hand up. Yes, you're mute. Oh, we can't hear you. You're muted. Sorry. We still can't hear you. Okay. While he's trying to fix that, Natasha, do you want to speak, or you want me to read out here? I see your question in the chat. Or would you like to speak? Okay, Justin, yeah, you can go ahead. I think you've unmuted now.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, team. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well. Yes.
Okay. First of all, let me thank you very warmly for moderating and keeping the initiative for Adigun Ade Abiodun public lecture. Thank you for that, and I wish also to extend my gratitude to Professor Peter Martinez for his, I would say, leading remarks, because it's not open remark. That's the leading remark, because that really provides overview and even more future perspective with prospective analysis on where the humanity may go with the space affair. And lastly, I wish to express my deepest gratitude and recognition to Professor Adigun Abiodun and his lovely wife, Judith, for the personal support to me, Justin Avarazo, during my tenure at the Intergovernmental Oceanography Commission of UNESCO, from where I retired recently in September, for the immense personal, moral, and from Ade professional and ethical, I would say, education at his school. Before I made a comment on the presentation, I wish just to remind that when at UNESCO, we started the first UNESCO interdisciplinary and intersectoral program on the application of satellite remote sensing for ecosystem and water resources in Africa. Ade was the engine to help us to bring together not only African community, but his talented network worldwide, connecting us, advising the team. And the legacy is that today we do have network of African oceanographic space scientists. So Ade, thank you again for your instant support and your commitment toward the youngest generation. Now, the question about should Africa get involved in COPUOS and all this matter due to lack of technology, I could not say more and better than Peter. He said it all. You know, don't get me wrong, but technology is the easiest part of any business. The most complex and the most needed is the policy and the governance. When you have national policy or continental policy, then you define your own perspective on where you want to go in any domain, and here in space domain in particular. In particular, the, let's say, governance structure of any UN body, in the case of space, it is COPUOS, require both engineer, scientist, technician, but also legal specialists and governmental officers who are well aware of the government policy, of national policies. So again, the technology is the easiest part of it. The most important is first to have the understanding on what the space can bring to the national development, national security, national welfare, and basically for any human being, just a matter of curiosity, getting access to knowledge. And what makes us human beings is our ability to develop knowledge, is our ability for imagination, is our ability, once we imagine our future, how do we put in place the facilities to get to that picture? So my point here is, yes, every African country has and must get engaged in the COPUOS business, as I would say, as ocean scientists, as well as the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission governance structure. Because that's where meeting with other delegates, other nation, you learn from the experience and you share your own experience. And cooperation starts from that. That's what the UN are for, building international intellectual solidarity and cooperation. If you are absent, you are even preventing yourself from getting possibility for international cooperation. I'll stop here to say that I fully support everything that Peter have said about it. But the challenge is, you know, let me say that again, don't get me wrong. It's not insult to ourselves. It is simply that most of the people in Africa believe that we have to just take care of basic need, you know, small stuff. But if you want to get your youth ambitious to raise above their potential, you need to have challenged the program. And space is one of the areas where a nation, a government can mobilize the youth to work for the future. In particular, in the case of South Africa, the University of Stellenbosch in the late 80s worked with the Department of Electronic and Engineering, whereby master students whom I met with Professor Sias Moster, they were the one behind the first South African satellite, Sombadila-Sat. And South Africa would not have been where it is today, and I'm speaking here under the control of yourself, Tim, and Peter, who are from the place, you know better than I do. But from distance, when I work with Sias Moster in the University of Stellenbosch, in the context of using space application for ecosystem, that's how I learned it. So again, we have to look up, not look down. Space is the future. And the ocean is our next frontier. I thank you. That's my contribution. Thank you again, team. Thank you again, Peter. And thank Ade and Judith for bringing us together today. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Congrats on your retirement. I heard a lot about you from Dr. Abiodun, even though we've not met in person physically. Yeah, thanks. Natasha, do you want to speak? Okay, sorry, I just saw your message now. Okay, let me see what I can read what you, or summarize it. So the question, Dr. Martinez, is how do we achieve a balance between the sovereign pursuit around space and the international collaboration? Sovereign pursuit, I guess that has to do with technology development, and then international cooperation, which I guess that also links to, okay, it's actually here, equipment, tech infrastructure investment, and knowledge sharing. Your thoughts on that?
Well, every country has to develop, has to decide on the trajectory that it wants to take in the space arena. And so there's a national discussion on the balance of priorities. This is a question that faces all policymakers. What is the balance between government control and the commercial sector running space activities? What is the balance between civil and military? What is the balance between self-reliance and reliance on international partners? And for every country, the answers are different. There's never one answer that fits all. But there will be some common elements that are cross-cutting. And so when it comes to questions of governance, simple things like rules of the orbit in space, what kinds of information should be communicated to avoid potential collisions, things around the safety of space operations. Those kinds of things, I think, are areas where there is enough common concern, common ground to have a shared understanding at the international level. So I would say that the safety aspects provide a good basis for that, and this is why fora like COPUOS are so good for addressing these kinds of issues, because it allows states not only to exchange their views and experiences, but it also contributes to capacity building. So there's a large element of the work that the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs does is in helping member states to build capacity, as Ade knows only too well from his time in the UN system. And these days, the office has an excellent program to support emerging space nations to build their national policy and regulatory capacity in space law. And there are other actors as well. Secure World also does this sort of thing, because we believe that informed engagement in multilateral fora like COPUOS is one of the ways of strengthening multilateralism and creating a safe, stable, peaceful, and sustainable space and future for all.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Is there any other contribution with respect to the lecture? I know Professor Maxland has put a chart around the ALC, but I just wanted to come if there's no other response or comment with respect to the lecture. Okay, Nelly?
Yes,
Yeah, Nelly, I see your hand up.
for Dr. Martinez. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my question is in regards to the African Space Agency, because I think Dr. Martinez a few years ago, quite a while ago, you did an article where you were discussing about the approach, the top-down approach of the formation of the agency, where individual states in Africa have not been, that regional integration has not been there set up, and it could be a potential challenge to the operationalization of the agency. And actually not much has changed since that time. So I don't know if you have any opinion on, the operationalization of AFSA going forward, being that a lot of national space agencies are still, of course, prioritizing national interest. How well do you think, or how do you think the AU would be able to, improve regional integration in the continent itself, which will be reflected in the space agency?
Yeah,
Dr. Martinez, if I may stretch the question a bit, I remember that paper. It was titled, "Is there a need for an African Space Agency?" And it was a central paper. And you looking at the environment at that time, I guess maybe, and of course, historically, you shared a position. So if I may stretch that question, there were different points that you listed there around conditions which would favor or one should consider when setting up a continental space agency. Between then and now, in addition to the issue of regional cooperation, the other conditions, do you think the time is ripe now, especially now that the African Union is making very spirited efforts to get the agency to become operational by early next year?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Great question. So yes, I wrote that paper at a time when the idea of an African space agency was being mooted, and there was quite a push from outside the continent. And Ade will remember meetings that were convened outside of the continent to talk about these things. And he and I, we shared our disbelief as to why is it that conversations about an African space agency are being driven not by Africans themselves. And so that was the context within which I made those remarks. I think that many of the challenges still stand, but where we have arrived today, even though it's taken longer, the process has been driven by Africans. I think that many of the challenges that I mentioned in my paper are still in place. But I think there is a way forward, and it will need capacity building. I think one of the challenges that we face in operationalizing these things is also at the level of the African Union, bringing everybody up to speed so that people can engage in conversations in an informed and equal basis. And I think there is still need for capacity building in that regard, especially among the policymakers who may themselves not be space people. I think that will be a necessary step to building the regional integration that was at the heart of the question.
And maybe yes, an attachment to that is the ALC, which is another initiative. Of course, the ALC came independent of the African Union, and
Yes.
be running kind of parallel up to a particular point in time. And looking at Maxwell's comment that she's disappointed that the ALC is no longer held. You may recall that when she was the director of UNUSA, she has been supporting the ALC, and then in particular in Ghana in 2013, She was physically present and facilitated quite a lot of things there. So now that I think the last ALC was in 2019, and there has been it's with turn of South Africa to host the ALC, but it appears there's no clarity, let me put it that way, as to whether they want to host or not. I don't know. She's suggesting maybe there should be a we should come together and see what we can do. But what are your thoughts on that?
I believe the ALC was a very interesting forum for the exchange of ideas. It brought together governments, officials, academics, industry people, and that was its value. I think that there could be use for reanimating the ALC, and perhaps it could happen under the umbrella of the African Space Leadership Institute. You know, the model that we had with the ALC was that the secretariat would rotate from one country to the next, and so part of the and this was good because it ensured you know, a nice regional distribution of the ALCs, and there was a predictable cycle of the events. But the negative side of that was that there was no permanent secretariat. And so each time the host was reinventing the wheel. And I think that that was perhaps one of the challenges with operationalizing the ALC was that every time a new host country was selected, that they would kind of have to get up to speed with running the ALC and implementing the resolutions of the last conference, and then it would be time to hand over to the next host. So I don't think we got that sort of continuity handled well, but perhaps the African Space Leadership Institute could provide that stability to support the African Leadership Conference. And so I'm just putting it out there. And I also want to make another remark in this regard. So, you know, and it's about the L in the acronym ASLI. You know, the leadership is not just, and the same applies for the ALC. Leadership is not just political leadership. It's not just industry leadership. It's also thought leadership. And I think this is where bodies like the ASLI and conferences like ALC can help to provide thought leadership on the questions about Africa's future in space. And I'll just stop there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And that's also something that has been bothering, I mean, that we've been talking about the ASLI. We actually want to shift from just, let me say, organizing events and to start doing proper thought leadership. Beginning to, you may be aware, the last IAC, the ESPI, which is like our counterpart in Europe, actually organized a roundtable for think tanks. And actually, ASLI was supposed to have been represented, but there were some last-minute issues. So thanks for the challenge. And even the ALC is also one of the things, Dr. Abiodun is here also, is also one of the things we've been discussing. And I know he has been making efforts to reach out to the colleagues in South Africa, but maybe he's going to speak on that later. I think for the interest of time, I'll allow Alma to speak and then give Dr. Martinez maybe one more chance to say some final remarks from his side before I bring in Dr. Abiodun to make his own response. Alma?
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for that presentation. Now, I was also at the IAC, and I like that you referred to the spacesuit designed by Prada in conjunction with Axiom. And I believe that is an excellent partnership in terms of even broadening the scope of perhaps commercials within the space sector. But I think it's also an excellent example of utilizing soft power to appeal to a wider audience. So my question is, given that sort of partnership, what sort of soft power mechanisms do you feel could work very well on our continent? in terms of expanding the audience for space and perhaps making it more relatable to the average person. So there's more support and more buy-in.
Yeah. That's an interesting question, and perhaps could be the topic of a ASLI webinar at some point. So I think the space community doesn't want to admit this, but in some cases, the space community does not do a very good job of promoting awareness of the societal benefits of space. A lot of people are not aware of how much they personally make use of space systems. And I'm not talking about in the developed, the highly industrialized countries. I'm talking about in developing nations where millions, indeed billions of citizens make use of space technologies daily in ways that they're not aware of. And I think the space industry or the space community in those countries could socialize awareness of this as a way of building public support for space programs, so that we don't have to face the perennial questions about, oh, why are we spending money on space when we have poverty, when we have, education challenges, etc., and show that space can support telehealth, telemedicine, education, that it supports disaster management, that it supports e-governance, and a whole host of other things, disaster management. And one can go on and on and on, and you all know what those examples are, but somehow image. And also, if we start seeing through a greater increase in the number of space activities that they are harmful to the atmosphere and contribute to all the concerns over climate change, that will give space a really, really bad name. So I think that socializing greater awareness of the societal benefits is important. And here we should seek out partnerships with the media to get them more involved in what we do, and to harness events like World Space Week and other opportunities that arise from time to time to raise the general awareness of the public and thereby the politicians as well. And this will help to build support for space. I think this is one very practical thing that all of us can do.
Thanks, Dr. Martinez. Alma Okwalefe is the Executive Director of the World Space Week Association. Dr. Abiodun, I don't see you here. I don't know whether because I want to bring you in now in case, so that you can also maybe make your own contribution, make a response to all that has gone on from the beginning up till now. And we begin to see how to wind down. You're muted right now, sorry. You're still muted, Dr. Abiodun?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. From New York, I say good morning to everyone on this link. And I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for your presence and participation in this important program. I want to thank Peter in particular for your magnificent presentation, which covers everything that we need to know right now. And the subject is very expansive, and it touches on everything. And the question is, you can imagine yourself on a track and where you are all running a relay race and changing buttons. How is Africa doing on that track today? But before we get there, I want to touch upon some of the things Peter has identified. He didn't put numbers on some of them. And that's what I want to do right now, put numbers on some of the things he has mentioned to us. For example, when space exploration started, as far back as the late 50s, early 60s, it was a space race. Today, it is not, it still remains a space race, but of a different nature. In other words, who gets the benefits? But to get the benefit, you have to make the investment. And to make the investment, you have to look at the different components of that investment. In your human talent, your financial support, and your political thinking. Peter mentioned a couple of times some of the things we've done together, particularly at the United Nations level. As all of you know, I was privileged to be the chairman of COPUOS. The most interesting part of my life is that I served that same organization throughout my life at the UN, because my office was part of the secretariat of COPUOS. And as I served COPUOS, I remember when I first joined in 1977, I used to make little notes to myself. Why is Africa in this room when we don't talk? But I will come back to that later. When I'm looking at the future of space, to date, most of the efforts have been at the low Earth orbit, with additional contribution from the geostationary orbit in terms of communication satellites. But when you look at the low Earth orbit, what do we have there? From Africa, we have satellites that have been purchased or built with the support of other countries. The question is, where's our commitment? Do you have to really have a satellite to be space capable? For many of the African countries, politically, yes, you have to have a satellite. And so many of the countries are buying satellites, getting them launched, but for what purpose? Now, the past 25 years or more, or even almost 50 years of space exploration, many countries have invested a lot in this arena. And they are reaping the benefits. The question is, Africa equally has invested some, but are we reaping any benefit? When you look at going into space today, you start with the rockets. The countries such as United States, Russia, and the countries that make up the European Space Agency, including India and China, today they have the capabilities. Where are our own capabilities to get up there on our own? We've been asking individual countries to help us launch our satellites, particularly our Earth observation satellites. And if you read my book, I made a big case for this. But which orbit are we using? Especially those of us from the equatorial orbit. We get our satellites launched in the polar orbit, instead of equatorial orbit. I've pleaded, I've screamed many times, go to Brazil, go to Malaysia. They understand the equatorial orbit more than we do. Let us collaborate with them. But so far, nothing is happening. Countries started getting into space. Today, as Peter said to you correctly, we have private companies dominating space, not dominating, but very prominent in space exploration. Now, there are 50, 40 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, there are one or two private companies. Now we have thousands of them, private companies, getting interested in different aspects of space, be it in rocketry, be it in data analysis, be it in moon landing. Everybody is there. SpaceX, for example, today has over 6,000 Earth observation satellites at the geostationary orbit, low Earth orbit. Some of them are, not every one of them is Earth observation, but they have 6,000. They are looking for over 24,000 to come in the future. There are other companies that are thinking in the same way in China, in Europe, and more other competing American companies. So that is in the area of satellites alone and space exploration. And then Peter spoke about congestion in space. Many of us in Africa are getting our satellites launched into space. But what protection? I remember the Nigerian satellite experienced 2 collision possibilities with a space debris. But courtesy of the United States, their own system was able to divert the debris that was going to terminate the life of those satellites in Nigeria. But what is most important is when we look at deep space research, because right now the emphasis is not only on low Earth orbit. The future of space is migrating into deep space exploration, going to Mars, going to the moon. So, for what purpose? Now, and the answer is for the economy. Economy is that's one of the major issues. To manufacture goods, to manufacture drugs, some of which are already coming down to Earth for use for human beings. If you want to launch a satellite today, you probably pay over $30 million, probably $60 million. With the rockets of the future, we are going to pay less because there are many more rockets to choose from. Okay? So the question is, when these countries get into space, Peter already identified that issue. What is the governance of that we dictate the ownership of whatever has been done? We have that on Earth, particularly in the Antarctica, where you have a lot of scientists, and the governance of that is in place. So if we want to look at that issue, we must go back to COPUOS and thank the United Nations for the Space Treaty, because it is the Space Treaty that continues to more or less serve as a major instrument today of space for space governance. Then there are countries that are doing space travels. Okay, you have Axiom Space, you have Boeing Company, which is building the aircraft most of us use, but also is involved in space. many people who have money are going into space just for travel. And all of this Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin by Jeff Bezos, who was the founder of Amazon, he is also doing the same thing. Therefore, a lot of tools, a lot of instruments, a lot of hardware are being placed in space for the benefit of humankind. But the question is, who's protecting these facilities in space when we are not only thinking of the economic benefits, we are talking of militarization at the same time. And we are talking about space debris. Who is going to clean up? To clean up, a number of companies have equally started to think about that. And finally, on the issue of future space exploration, I've asked Etim to show you a small video. Etim, do you have that video ready? Etim?
Yes, I do. Do you want to play it now?
Yeah, I will play it at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're going to see a video. When people are going to go into space and going to explore the moon and Mars and so on and so forth, how are they going to stay there? That video will show you the efforts that are in progress right now to make that possible. But everything I've said is about other continents, about other parts of the world, not about Africa. I remember when I joined the UN in 1977, there was a German company that was trying to launch satellites from Zaire. That effort was truncated immediately by the superpowers, partly for two reasons, I think. One, because of the history of Germany in terms of wars in our world, and secondly, because of competition. Then you're possibly familiar with the launching platform in Kenya that was developed by the Italians. Etim and myself were there in 2011 to see what was going on. And the question I asked at that moment in 2011, I had the question of my own brothers and sisters in Kenya. What is your role in this center? Very, very few. When I go to the United Nations, the section I was working for, called the Space Application Section, was responsible for educating the developing countries about space and what they can do to be part of it and to get involved and make use of it, and so on and so forth. To get that done, Sierra Leone in 1968-69 had to make 1971, sorry, had to make a motion after the first UN conference on space in 1968 that the UN should make all the opportunities possible for the developing countries to be part and parcel of the space exploration and utilization. And that was how the program I supervised was established. But when I got there, most of the training were given to people were being conducted in foreign countries, Europe, Soviet Union, United States, Canada. And I said, and the examples being used for the participants were examples from those countries. So I raised the issue and I said, this is not right. Subsequently, when I became the chief of the office in 1981, I started discussing with my own colleagues who are from Germany, Mexico, Russia. We need to focus on shifting the focus of training and education physically into the developing countries. And that was how the centers we have that Etienne mentioned at the beginning of this day, that is how we started all of that effort. But in doing that, in preparing for that, I had to travel basically all over the place. And I remember properly today, I will not forget, I went to one of the Northwest European countries, and I presented my case. And I remember the ambassador telling me, Mr. Abiodun, why are you trying to take sophisticated technology to the developing countries? And I said to him, so that we can know and do exactly what you are doing and take advantage of the same opportunity you are taking. I remember also going to France. I don't speak French, and they expected me to go to 6 different departments to talk about my issue. I said, no, my request was to meet France, and I want to see all these 6 agencies at one meeting. And they disagree with me, and I disagree with them, and I left. And I said, when you want to see me, call me back. You know my address. They eventually invited me back to France to come and address them on the centers. We established the centers, but I do not remember, as of this moment, if France ever contributed any support to any of these centers. So what I'm trying to say is that helping Africa is not an easy task if Africa itself is not making the effort. Why do I say that? My first UN course in Africa, or my second, the first was in Kenya in 1978. My second one was in Nigeria in 1979. And I remember Nigeria's Minister of Science and Technology, my Nigerian Minister of Communication at that time. He happened to be somebody I call a colleague of mine because we entered the same plane to come to the US together in 1962 for our education. But he came back home and became a politician. And I went into academics and later into the UN. And when I was speaking at the meeting we organized in November 1979 at Ibadan, there were 2 young professors or assistant lecturers, whatever you call them, at the University of Ibadan, who were seeking support from the Nigerian government for their research. And this man would not listen to them. So they came to me and asked me to intercede. I did. But the bottom line was the man was telling me, this minister was telling me that, Dr. Abiodun, you don't understand me. We need experts in this country. These boys are upstarts, they are not experts. I just came back from Germany. They build this equipment. It can do everything. I said, for Nigeria? He said, yes. And when the equipment breaks down, where are you going to go? Go back to Germany? Do you have an expert in Nigeria to repair it? Please give these young people the opportunity to do their best for Nigeria. If they fail, okay, we know they failed. If they succeed, we know we have our own experts. The bottom line, the meeting didn't go well. And I told him, point blank, I said, Honorable Minister, you and I do not share the same view on the future of Nigeria. Good night. And I left him. So I joined the UN, and I remember my first paper, which is really not known. It was published in a journal, a magazine called West Africa, published in London at that time. It was published in January 1981. And the title is Technology Development in Africa. It was in the centerfold of that January 1981 issue. And I poured my whole heart in the 2 pages of that thing about the technological void in Africa. You all know very well, if you are an African, as I am, we are so consumed and concerned with technology transfer rather than technology development. If you transfer technology into a society where it cannot grow, it's not going to take root. And that's what we are still doing up to today. I've pleaded with many of my brothers and sisters in Africa that when you go into space field, you need to bring your politicians into the picture. You need to bring the universities into the picture. You need to bring the private sector into the picture. Above all, you need to organize annually or biannually what you call a national dialogue. This is what we are doing. These are our experience. These are the problems we face. This is where we are going. What are your inputs? So far, I don't see that happening. When a country goes into space in Africa and gives that responsibility to a government ministry without the input of the academic community, as is the case in many of the African countries, it's not going to happen. ASLI asked me to give a presentation exactly a month ago on how Africa can cooperate internationally in space exploration and utilization. And I said at that time I don't remember the number of participants that were there, but most of them were diplomats in Addis Ababa. And there were some other space students outside Addis Ababa who joined the lecture. And I pleaded with them that the first place to start is with your government. Because no matter how educated you are, if you don't get the government support, your exercise or whatever you are doing may not take root. And when I look at taking roots and the role of government in Africa, Peter mentioned a lot about that, about COPUOS. I used to complain behind the scenes about the role of Africa at COPUOS. But publicly, in the year 2006, when I made my last speech as chairman of COPUOS, I said bluntly to the African countries, what are you doing here? As Peter said, over 20 of you are members of this committee. Do we have 10 of you in this room, or even 12 or 8? When America comes to COPUOS, when Germany comes to COPUOS, when Australia comes to COPUOS, when Brazil comes to COPUOS, they bring their best talents. The politicians come, the ambassadors come, but they bring their scientific talents to contribute to the debate. So if you are looking for international cooperation, this is where you start. They see what you have to offer. And if you don't share the same values with them, cooperation is not because I love you. Cooperation is, what are you, my cooperating with you, is it in my interest? If Africa is going to cooperate with Germany, what's Africa bringing to the table? In the past few years, we have been organizing meetings with other countries. I say other countries, and all the continental governments, they take up with their suits and go to Turkey, go to Russia to have meetings with Africans. You want to have meetings with Africans? Why don't you come to Africa and have the meetings? Why should Africa come to you? And therefore, when you are going to do anything about such as space, start at the level that has relevance to the people. It improves their communication, it improves their transportation, it improves their agricultural development. It gives them enough adequate information about weather forecasts. Is that what we're doing? Or we are trying to sign agreements that we cannot fulfill? So Africa needs to help itself. And as I said earlier, so when I gave this lecture a month ago, I begged the participants to go back home and make recommendations to their own governments. If you are going to go into space, whom are you going to associate with? The ones that have been there for ages with vast experience, or the ones that are learning just like you, but are making success out of it? For me, I start with the latter. You go to Malaysia, you go to South Africa, you go to Brazil, and you end up with India as an African country. Collaborate with those people. You will get, they will share with you the same experience that you are going through, the difficulties you are going through. You are not going to get that from the super industrialized countries of the world. You are not. So, and not only do you do that, you take the best brains. You use your best brains. If you go back to the book I wrote in 2017, I made a suggestion there for Nigeria. And that recommendation is good for any African country. You are struggling about how to get into space in a proper order. So go to some of these countries that I've just mentioned and some advanced ones and ask them some fundamental questions. How did you start? What were your headaches? How did you overcome them? What is your level of discipline on the job? And so on and so forth. From that, you will understand why South Africa says, we in South Africa, we are the eye of Africa in space. And why America says, space is our way of life. And Russia says, space is our developmental tool. Are these true for Africa as a whole? So I concluded that lecture, and I want to share with you as my conclusion what I said then. Please bear with me. It's not said. The first thing Africa has to do is to be like the Indians. When India went into space, all they did was to ask America to loan them a satellite that was idle in space. But when they got that satellite, they used it for 1 year, and by American rule, they have to pay for it. So they pay $1 to loan that satellite from the United States. So UNSA gave them that communication satellite. And they use it for one purpose only, to educate their own people on hygiene, on agriculture. Those were the two focuses. From that effort today, India established what you call VRC, Village Resource Centers, where you as a villager, you can go to this center and any information you need to know about what you want to know, be it in agriculture, be it in health, be it in sanitation, is there. And they link you with hospitals and universities at those resource centers in India. Go there and see. It started with one center. Today, there are over 400 of such centers all over India, getting people at the village level to associate and relate with the use of space for their own social and economic development. Africa wants to do the same. You have to, and then the Indians also. They encourage their professors not only to teach in the classroom, but to bring their talents to the parliament, either as advisors or talk to the committees, or be a parliamentarian. So in conclusion, let me say the following. Whether in space or in any other area of human effort and development, Africa must engage its inquiring minds. Our efforts in space-related activities to date are very encouraging and maybe certainly need to be taken to higher levels that can challenge Africa's inquiring minds to achieve what I call greater rewards for the continent and its people. However, there's a non-negotiable prerequisite Africa will need to fulfill. To successfully attract such inquiring minds to its shores, Africa will need to shed its preoccupation with technology transfer. In its place, it must embrace technology development. Only the application potentials of a given technology, we must shed our preoccupation with technology transfer, and also in its place, we must not focus only on the application opportunities in that. African countries should give priority to investing in the development of the corresponding knowledge and understand how and why a given system works the way it does. The absence of such a commitment to date probably accounted for Africa's conspicuous absence in the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee. This is a committee that is focusing on cleaning the space debris in outer space. Okay, then there's another committee, and that same committee developed the space guidelines. But in the absence of Africa participating, it has been imposed on the Global Committee, and the Global Committee is enforcing the rules that was put forward by 14 leading institutions of the world. Thus, it is apparent that while a large percentage of global community is moving ahead with or without Africa's input, the message for Africa should be clear and should sink in very deeply. In the space age of today, countries that are able to help themselves, that invest in the generation of knowledge and can contribute to innovations are often enthusiastically welcome to interact at the research and development level with their counterparts within the space-faring and space-capable communities of our world. South Africa is enjoying that today. When Africa resolutely commits itself to accomplish the same, as well as prepare itself to purposefully participate in the space enterprise of the future, which Peter has adequately and brilliantly illustrated today, we will not need to ask for any invitation. Indeed, such will freely come to us in torrents. Thank you. And I thank Peter, and I thank all of you who have helped me grow up in my life, who have contributed to whatever I may say I've done or achieved. Most of you on this panel or this meeting, I've met most of you. Some are my relatives, some my students, some my colleagues, some my teachers, and some are the ambassadors who paved the way for me as I work at the UN. I thank each and every one of you. God bless you.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we go into like an interactive session to interact with Dr. Abiodun and share tributes or testimonies or messages, I don't know, Dr. Martinez, I still want to bring you in at this point. Maybe you have any final word? You created some...
Etim, I'm sorry, I forgot to add. On the ALC will come back alive. I'm working with South Africa on that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So maybe a final word, you've created some scenarios. Do you want to point to a particular scenario that Africa should be working towards, and how should Africa prepare towards that? And of course, looking at the responses, the questions that came up, the interactions, any final set of comments? So you're muted, sorry, Dr. Martinez.
Thank you, Atim. Well, I think Ade in his remarks addressed some of the challenges in the African context. I think that the only point I would want to reiterate is this is the point I made earlier about the need for thought leadership. I think that this is one of the roles that the African Space Leadership Institute can provide, because it's not about it's not a political leadership body or an industry leadership body, but I think it can help to provide thought leadership on addressing these challenges that I mentioned to and that Ade further elaborated on in his remarks. So I just want to leave you with that parting thought of a possible role for ASLI in that regard. And then, in other words, in terms of shaping Africa's future in space. And then finally, just note that I'm happy to hear, Ade, that it looks like the ALC may be revived. I think that this would be a great forum to reconvene. So congratulations to you for trying to keep it going, and I wish you all success in those endeavors.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. Thanks for the lecture. Thanks for, I know it's quite early and with all the jet lag and everything. Thanks everyone for participating in the lecture. You're welcome to still stay back for us to have some interactive session and interact with Dr. Abiodun, interact with one another, discuss the topic of the lecture further, discuss about Africa further. And so thank you very much. The floor is open for anybody that wants to say hello, say some things about Dr. Abiodun, your experience with him, your working relationship. You're welcome to speak. And maybe I should just mention this also. We are having plans to have, the last year when we had this lecture, it was virtual. This year it's also virtual. We are hoping that next year it's going to be in person. I'm going to push Dr. Abiodun. I hope he'll be able to travel. I wanted to come down to his home country, Nigeria, for an in-person edition next year. I'm also trying to push him. Dr. Abiodun is about 86 now, if I'm not mistaken. I know it's very difficult, but I'm trying to push him to rush up his autobiography also. If that's going to be available by next year, hopefully we can launch that autobiography during the next public lecture, hopefully in Nigeria. I hope, now that I've publicly declared it, I trust that Dr. Abiodun will push himself to. All right, thank you. Yeah, Justin, I see your hand up. Hello, Justin. There are some comments coming in the chat box, so Dr. Abiodun, you're welcome to read them as well, so that I don't need to read all. Yeah, Justin.
Justin, unmute yourself. You might need to unmute him.
Hello, Justin.
You have to let him. He's unmuted.
No, he can
Oh, he's
unmute.
muted. It's me. Okay, he's unmuted now.
Okay.
I said I will be
First of all,
free to speak. I'm going to stop recording so that we are free to speak and interact. So I'm going to stop recording at this point.
no,
Yeah,
you can record this one. You can record this one for memory and report because
okay.
because I want to say that I fully support the suggestion to have physical in presence ASL. I will not say meeting. I will say international conference in Nigeria, in the home place of Ade. I fully support. I will even commit myself that if we start to plan it ahead, at least 1 year ahead, we shall endeavor to mobilize as much as we can. Things are very uncertain in Africa, and I'm sorry to say that. Things are very uncertain, but in any case, we'll strive to bring as much as we can support from different programs. I will say different relevant programs in ocean science, in space science, in environment, from the academia, from the network of African Academy of Science, to be part of it, because that is how we show really the transdisciplinary and intersectoral benefit of space to national development. So I really and fully back you to have this international ALC conference in Nigeria, which is neighbor country to my own in Benin. We are very close neighbor, and I'll be very happy to give my time to the planning and preparatory work with you, the team. Thank you. And finally, I would say that Ade, we do still need you. Continue to guide us. Peter, like you, I'm far away from Africa, but I like to tell my African fellow, I'm based in Europe, in Paris, but my mind and my heart are in Africa. So from outside, we can continue to contribute as much as we do. We did in the past. We will continue to do that, and we have to increase our network. Now that I take my leave from UNESCO, I have more time for myself to do what I believe is a priority for my life, for us as a community. And thank you, Ade, for showing us the way. Thank Peter for your time and for your insightful presentation. Please, team, make sure that you send the video and the link for record so that we can disseminate to the network, universities, school, ministry, and also to the overseas partners. Thank you very much for this very educative conference. Thank you.
So thank you, Justin. And just to mention that the ALC, unless South Africa advises otherwise, the ALC is actually planned to be in South Africa. And Dr. Abiodun is already working with them. So hopefully that should happen next year. I was talking about the next public lecture, the third one, which hopefully should be in Nigeria. So hopefully those two meetings should happen next year, as you have hinted. Thank you. Dr. Abiodun, you were talking about the video. Do you want me to play that video? I think it's just about...
Yeah, if you have the video, let the people see the video.
It's about 3 minutes, so...
Yeah, I think so. I think it's less than 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yes. If I could very briefly, before you play the video, I have another meeting starting in 3 minutes, so I would just like to very, very briefly thank you and the Institute for inviting me to give the presentation today. I hope that you found the remarks interesting and stimulating, and also to thank you for the honor of giving this lecture in honor of Dr. Abiodun, with whom I've had so many years of pleasant cooperation, and looking forward to many more, Ade, in other contexts.
Thank you, Peter. It was an excellent contribution, and we appreciate you. God bless you. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Femi Abuola, you have something to tell us?
It's not.
Your connection is poor.
Still look, the thought is still there. We still the link for this, so I can share with other people that I know. That is okay. I hoping to have a link so that I can share this with those who are not here, because there's a lot of move towards private sector participation now, and those people needs to hear all this, all that has taken place here, all that was said here, in order to be able to know how to go about what they are doing. So thank you very much for this, but I need a link so I can share it with them and compel them to listen to the whole thing.
Thank you, Dr. Abuola. I think the sound is not very good, but the link will be made available. Okay. Sorry, I thought you had finished. The link will be made available as soon as it's ready. So I'll just share the video. It's just a 3-minute video, less than 3 minutes actually. So let me see whether I can put it up.
Yeah, that's it.
The International Space Station took 60 launches and $100 billion. Unless we make usable space in space a lot less expensive and much, much larger, humanity's future in space will remain limited. My first company, Made in Space, pioneered the first in-space manufacturing. But I quickly realized if we were ever going to bring real commercialization to space, we needed a lot more volume. Expandables are the only comprehensive solution that allow this to be possible. And no one in the world knows space expandables better than Maxim.
I built the first 2 inflatable deployable spacecraft, Genesis 1 and 2, and they're still circling the globe to this day. Despite the success, we needed still a much bigger size. We developed a proprietary expandable architecture. It decomposes the pressure shell into discrete uncoupled structural elements. It means that we can double, triple, quadruple the size of our architecture with full predictability.
Our expandables at max space are safer and stronger than standard metallic architecture. We've tested our modules to the limit. We exploded them, launched projectiles at them, vibe tested, vacuum tested, exposed them to space's harshest conditions. Our max space models are bigger, easier to manufacture, and more scalable than other systems. We just finished our full fidelity ground unit and are now building our flight unit, which will be the largest expandable habitat to ever go to space. The cost of launching to space is dropping dramatically, but without access to more volume, the potential of space remains out of our grasp. Our mission is to unlock a new frontier for humanity. This will enable new drugs to be created in space, revolutionary space farming technologies, removing heavy industry's limitations on Earth, and a new type of entertainment. Everything we do stems from one goal: more volume, less cost. We get orders of magnitude more volume per rocket. That means one ISS at less than 1% of the cost. Max Space was created to maximize space in space in a way that's never been possible before.
That's it. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Okay.
Okay. Any further contributions? Otherwise,
No, Tim, I think you need to make a comment about the video they've just seen.
Are you getting caught short of with the bearskin waterproof soft shell jacket? You won't even need an umbrella. This is the ultimate waterproof tactical jacket. Why? Because it keeps you warm as a bear.
I'm sorry.
I think you need to make a comment on the video.
Ibim is you.
Okay, all right. I can be, now, when people are talking about living in space, that is one of the habitations. Like you build a house on Earth, that is the infrastructure people are going to live in to protect them from the space environment. So people are building that already and testing them. Okay. I'm sure they come in different sizes at different costs. And also, if there are competing companies, then you see different qualities. But that is one example you've seen of what is being planned to stay on the moon, to stay on Mars, as humans continue to expand and explore space further.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, yeah. Like one of the competing companies is Bigelow Aerospace. That's one of the companies making habitats also. Okay, I think I don't know if there is no other comments coming up. No other anybody that wants to speak. I think we can adjourn at this point. Thank you, everyone, once again for being part of this meeting and staying up to this point. Thanks for all.
Yeah, before you adjourn, just let me thank everybody that is still online.
Okay.
Justina Hanso, Nola from
thank you.
Justin is from Benin Republic, and then Nola was one of the UN students who participated in the training course in Stockholm as well as in Ecuador with us from Jamaica, and she's from Jamaica. And then
thank you very much, Dr. Abiodun.
And then there's Kehinde Abolari, and he was introduced to me. I don't think we've met, but he was introduced to me when he was doing his PhD program in space policy. And then there's Tajuddin Salami. Now the picture I see here, I don't know whether it's the father or the son, but the father was my special assistant when I worked in Nigeria, and the son went on to become a mechanical engineer working with Nigerian Railways. And of course, Funlayo, that's Funlayo Effiong, that's Etim's dear wife, whom we all know very well. There's BC. We all grew up together as children in Abeokuta, and she's now back in Nigeria. She went to Britain as a nurse and retired. and came back to Nigeria. And Professor Anifoshe was one of my, I would not say one of my students, but he was, because he's bigger than my student, being my student. He's now a professor at Federal University of Technology, Akure.
Thank you very much, sir.
And
Nice to see you again.
Right, and he was with us at in Stockholm. And when I think he was with us again in Botswana when we did a roundup.
Yes, in Botswana, yes.
Of the program. And of course, there's Dr. Femi Abuola, who it was my pleasure to meet him in Nigeria when I was there. He's one of the directors of NASDA, of many years of experience. He studied in the US also before coming to Nigeria. There are some names. Kuyeo, I don't. Please, can you show your face to us, Kuyeo? And then there's Kuyeo, can you show your face to us, please?
Take the O out of it. I'm trying to.
Professor Dr. Kuye. Dr. Kuye, Doctor. Okay, Doctor, I have to say one word about Dr. Kuye, but more importantly, I must say something about his dad. Anytime I think of my life, Dr. Kuye, whom we are looking at now, is a medical doctor. He's retired. He's from Marome also, and his father was the chief of one of the Arome villages. And when I finished high school, and I was just something around not knowing what to do, I was too tired and too afraid of what the result could be or would not be. But I went to the village, and his father saw me, and he said, Adigun, what are you doing? I said, we just finished the final exam in high school, and I'm very tired, and so I want to rest. He said, you want to rest? He said, yes. I said, okay, can you see me tomorrow, please? And so I went back to my own village, to my mother, that Dr. Kuye's father would like to see me tomorrow. And so I'm going to go to his village and see him. To cut a long story short, I went to see him the following day. He gave me an envelope. He said I should go to Lagos. And I went to Lagos to see him. And I went to Lagos, and that letter became the letter of my first employment in Federal Survey of Nigeria, my first job after high school. And he more or less set the stage for people in my life as I was growing up. He was the first. And Dr. Kuye has been a very successful medical doctor. He worked for Pfizer company here in the US before retiring. Where's the plug? So thank you very much, Dr. Kuye.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Where's the electricity, the battery?
Okay. Dr. Abiodun, any other?
No, I don't have any more thing. I don't have anything. I just want to really appreciate everybody who's here with us. And I'm very grateful to God that you all came. And God bless you. Abdul Razak, can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Yes, I'm from Ethiopia, Ethiopian Space Science and Geospatial Institute. I'm a Deputy Director General currently. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you remember you were talking about the class you gave last month in Addis?
Right. He was one of that.
That's one of our hosts. In fact, a very important. I didn't know it was him. Sorry, it was the major support for that program to happen. I mean, if not, it would have happened. So that's the deputy director of the Ethiopian Space. The Ethiopian Space Agency, but it's called Ethiopian Space Science.
I see. Okay. Tajuddin Salami, is that you or your dad? I want whoever is on the line to speak. If it's you, speak. If it's your dad, I want to hear his voice. Okay? Can you unmute yourself and speak, please? Tajuddin Salami. Okay. And Mr. Kuyo.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. It's Bola Salami, sir.
Oh, is the father?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Bola, thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank you for your services, and thank you for protecting me when I was in Abuja. Bola thought I was too ignorant for Nigeria. And so he was like my assistant and my security guard and my friend, and his family was my family.
It was a pleasure, sir.
And Bola, God bless you. And he's now a director in the office of the Secretary to the Government of Nigeria.
No, I've moved, sir. I'm now in Petroleum, Ministry of Petroleum, sir.
Oh, you got a job with money. So that's okay. That's good.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Kuyo, can you speak with us, please? Kuyo, can you speak with us? Unmute yourself.
You just recognized me a few minutes ago.
Sorry. Your name is Kuyo.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the same professor, doctor I just spoke about. BC, you want to speak with us? Let us see your face. Unmute yourself. Are you in Abeokuta or in London? Which of the two? Okay. You are not doing so. And I think our team is about to wind up.
All right. Dr. Abiodun has already given the thanks, so no further thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very, very much, everyone. God bless you.
Just to say that I look forward
to... thanks a lot for coming. God bless everyone.
Thank you, sir. And hopefully we all see in person around this time next year in Nigeria, depending on where Dr. Abiodun wants us to meet. I see a quick hand up, Kehinde.
Thank you so much for the for the wealth of knowledge shared today. I'm Kehinde Abolari, and I just want to appreciate everyone in the house. It's been of immense knowledge to me today. To learn from this platform. And I just want to say special thank you to Dr. Abiodun as well. I interviewed you for my PhD. I also interviewed Mr. Ed's team as well. And so I really want to appreciate you, for your support and all you do for the space technology in Africa. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abolari. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Abiodun, for allowing this to happen. Thank you for making it a success. And maybe more importantly, thank you, Mrs. Abiodun, because I know you are the engine room. My father-in-law calls my wife engine room, so I now use that word for for our women. So thank you very much, and bye, everyone. Bye for now.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Ade. Thank you, Martinez. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.